Hi everyone, it's Deborah. I have had a viewer request from AJCA to talk about binding journals in different ways. So I thought that I would just pull out some of the journals I have and just go through the different ways that I use. I am by no means an expert. These are just the ways that I bind my journals. So the common way that I do it is this one here, which is called a pamphlet stitch. There are 3 holes. I've used wax thread and it just goes in and out through the holes to create the binding. So that's the most common way that I personally use. If I am using a big journal like this one, where I have multiple signatures, and let me get that in shot for you. So you can see there I've got multiple signatures. There are 5 of them in this journal. I have also used that same pamphlet stitch to bind them. And the way that I do that when I have multiple signatures, I'm just finding the centre of the journal, the signature for you. I use a method where I put the binding, it'll be here somewhere, here it is. So you can see it's the same as the other one, except I've got 5 of them. Now I attach this to another piece of paper and I sew them on that piece of paper. Then I stick that paper down into the book. So this is a hardcover book that I have gutted, and I stick that down in there so that I've got 5 signatures and you can't actually see the binding on them. Okay, so that's how I do that. This one here is called Coptic binding, and again I've done it with some leather thread. And the beauty of this one is you're basically looking at doing each page at a time, and you're looping your needle around and you're kind of tying a knot, and you do like 1, 2, 3 on 2 pages, and then you put the next page on and you do all 3. I will put a link below to the person I watched to learn this. And the beauty of this method is, let's just get one thing back. Unlike the binding, the 3 pamphlet stitch, you can also do a 5 pamphlet stitch, which means you add 2 more holes, but I usually do a 3. And unlike this one, where you might have some difficulty in laying your pages flat, the Coptic binding method allows you to lay your pages flat. It also allows you to do a page, like a single page like this, that doesn't have a matching one on this side, so that you can add single pages. So these ones here are all done so that I've folded pages in half, and there's a piece on one side and a piece on the other side of the piece that's bound, like that. Whereas this one here, these are single pages, and as you turn them, the pages will lie really, really flat. In fact, you can put them over like that. So that's the advantage of doing that, the fact that you can lie it flat and you can use a single page and still create a book. This method here is used, I have used a booklet and I have just done the same thing. I've done a 3-hole pamphlet stitch in the centre, and it's actually the cover of an old stationery set. I do have a video on most of these. And again, it's a 3-hole pamphlet stitch on that one. This is the one made from the pianola roll, and with this one I've used that method with the accordion. So in here there's a little accordion and I've put the pages into the accordion. And again, I will put links to all of these different methods so that you can see how I've done them. And in the case of the Coptic binding, I can't quite remember the lady's name, but I know I'll be able to find her easily. She does a really good explanation of binding that Coptic binding. This is a different way of doing it. So this is a book that I have done where I have got an old hard book cover novel, and I've added in the pages with manila folders, and I've kind of stuck them onto each other. So there's no stitched binding in this one. It's simply that piece of cover, and then within there I've used other pieces to create all of these fold outs and things. The other example of that same sort of method is this book here. So with this one, I've got the same thing. I've got a piece of manila card, and then onto that I've attached all of the things that I want to use. So again, there's no actual stitched binding or anything in this particular one. And then finally, this one here is done, and I've used envelopes with this one. So what I've done is I've attached the envelopes to each other. That's created my spine, and then I've put a booklet on the front of it and then a cover around it. And I hope that that helped. Moving on, the next request comes from Mary Jager, and Mary wants me to tell her where I get my vintage items from. So I've got out a few of my tubs. Now I've got quite a bit of vintage items that I need to list in my Etsy store, and I haven't done that yet, but this maybe will be an impetus for getting me to do that. I have been kind of waiting until I retired, and I've only got another couple of days work, and then I'll get on to all this. So first of all of this sort of stuff, I've got these old blueprints and different pieces. They came from a vintage shop here in Brisbane. This interesting looking thing is actually, well, that's a little Memo book that I got from an antique shop, and at the same time I bought this. So this is an Ex Libris stamp. If you don't know what that is, it's the thing that was used, and probably still is, where you had a stamp and that's it there, and this went into the front of your books so that you knew if you lent somebody books, you knew where, you know, who had them, that they would open it and see that it was yours. Now this is a whole box full. Some, sorry I should have showed you that, some of the empty papers that have been left in the box, and others have actually got the prints on them. So some of them are stuck together, some are not. So that's what this is, and the matching stamp. I don't think I can use the stamp, but it came with the box, so I bought it all, and I like all these little empty papers as well. So that was at an antique shop that I go to here in Brisbane, or just outside of Brisbane actually. Then in this tub here, I have got a number. Oh, that's an escaped one. Oh no, that's something different. So that's just from the front of a book. And then I've got these London magazine. These came from a flea market in London, and these are from a book. These are old pieces from a book that I pulled apart. What's this one? That's just a kid's book. And then I've got some old little postcard things. What do you call them? They're like a cigarette card, but they're not. And that's another Ex Libris thing. So they're just bits of paper. This came from a book as well. You just need to keep an eye out for different books. I've got tickets that have got a jockey scale on them from December 1940. So these are McWhirter's, which is a shop that used to be here in Brisbane. These all came from a vintage shop that I have just up the road. A little book, some Australian Home Journal, these old tickets, check, they're old checks, a tractor log, so that's also there. And this is a book that I found, a little old book which has got interesting things. The shorthand book, I actually purchased this off eBay because I wanted a shorthand book, and some other things too. So that's more from, oh, this is from an old book that I bought down in Tasmania. So whenever we go away, I look for things to see what I can find. So all these old tickets and things, they came from another vintage shop that's just up the road from me. And I think that that's probably the secret, is just to look. And often I come home and I have nothing. But I think it's important that you look, because, you know, 90% of the time you may not find anything, and then out of the blue you'll stumble on something. These cards, these are cigarette cards. These came from a vintage shop here in Brisbane, but I didn't just go in and pick them up. I actually spent like an hour picking through all of these old bits of paper so I could find them. So like I said, they're not just going to jump up and be in your lap. These are old lotto or housey cards, and got some more of those there, a whole stack of green ones. So it's a matter of perseverance. These are, that's not old obviously, these are the chemist journals that I bought, and I bought these from Gumtree. So again, that's another place you can look on Gumtree. And some of these things I've purchased from somebody else. These are, oh, this is a little handbook. This came from a vintage shop as well. And also you have to be prepared to pay. So I always work out if it's going to be worthwhile. This book, it's had a lot more in it. I pulled it apart, was $10. And maybe that was too much, but it was what I wanted. These exercise books that I bought, they're old Department of Queensland exercise books. These are the punch cards that came from Latvia. So I bought these off eBay and they came in. I waited a long time, but I got them from Latvia. This is a restaurant docket book, and it was in an op shop, and it was only $2. It's fairly new, but I thought it was still pretty cool. When I grunge that up, it'll be fine. These are books, and I bought them from one of the op shops that specialises in books, and I found them, a whole packet of them. I think somebody had obviously done a big clean up, and I just looked for these, and I like that they're old. I can tell they're old because they're back in the transition between decimal and imperial, so from 2 and 6 to 25 cents. So that was in 1966, so they're in the late 60s, maybe early 70s, but it was one person's thing. I also like that in this one I got some of the handwritten notes where this person had cut things out onto the tissue paper and resized them and see writing on them, so I thought that that was very cool as well. And then finally, this is stuff that I bought overseas. So I've got lots of these little cards, cigarette cards. And again, I bought these, all of this came from the markets when we were in the UK last year. And these came out of a book. I've pulled them out. So these came from, I think it was in Amsterdam. Pretty sure it's Amsterdam. I got those. But a lot of these cigarette cards, in fact all the cigarette cards came from there. I also got these. These came from, I think somewhere in Germany where we were, and I was in a little vintage shop and they had all of these sorts of things in there. The photographs also came from that, these cabinet cards, sorry, not the photos. The photos are out of that book. And as well from the markets, there's more of those little envelopes. I bought quite a few. As well from the markets, I got all these old vintage postcards. So most of them have writing on the back of them. And again, I just stood there and picked through them for about 20 minutes and found the ones that I liked. And this is something that came from a vintage shop in, I think this was, not quite sure where that was now, I can't remember. It's somewhere in Germany. These came from the markets in Barcelona, so they're a little kids flip book, all written in Spanish. And this one as well, these are little cards that you have inside, and each little card set tells a little story. So they've got 4 little cards or 3 little cards, and they tell a story about what's going on in Carcemine's house. So this is a story about your house and 3 tarjetas. Tarjetas is Spanish for cards. So you can see this has got 4 tarjetas, 6 tarjetas, and each of them tell a little story. I'm not sure how I'm going to market them yet. This also is the lace thing that I bought. Now I got this from a place in Dresden which had all fabric and things in it, and they had a few little things. That's where this came from as well. So I think, you know, these came from the markets. These are markets in, I think that was in Amsterdam as well. I'm not sure, Amsterdam or maybe somewhere in Sweden. I'm just trying to look at the writing. Don't know, but these are old Czech things, so they're original. So I think, you know, yeah, I'm lucky that I can travel. Not at the moment, of course, but I have travelled, and every time we go away, I spend time looking at markets and, you know, op shops and things like that. And I have a very patient husband that allows me to do that. But And then in Brisbane, when I'm here, I look for things. When we went on holidays in Tasmania and Victoria, New South Wales, wherever we go, I'm always looking in op shops and at flea markets and things. You know, hopefully you'll get lucky and find things. And I hope that helped, Mary. I hope that's answered your questions. Of course, if you live in the UK or Europe or the US, you have access to so much more stuff than we do. Because Australia is only a young country, that's why I like to look when I'm overseas, because we just don't have that old ephemera that you get when you're in Europe and places like that. And now the other thing, I've got a couple more people who've asked me questions. So the other thing is this one here. This was a little book that I made a little while back, and I think that Valerie Weatherby has asked me to make a pattern tissue journal similar to what Shabby Soul makes. So that's Susie from Shabby Soul. I actually have done that already, and this is the result of making that. So I'm not sure, I think this is what she meant, where I've sandwiched the tissue paper. I haven't done it the same as Shabby Soul, but I've used that sort of thing as an inspiration, and I've sandwiched the tissue paper between a layer of file folder. I've got the tissue paper on both sides, and then I've added in different things. So I'll put a link to that particular video so that you can go back and have a look, Valerie, and then let me know if you meant something else. Now, I'm showing you this journal, which I know I've shown you recently, but this is a question or an idea that I had from Susan Davis, and I have actually responded to Susan's comment. She was asking me about making a wedding journal. Now, I don't have any need for a wedding journal, so I'm probably not going to make one, but this is a lap book that I made, and I would think that this would be great as a wedding journal. In fact, I think it'd be great as a wedding guest book, or a guest book for any occasion, really. And how I've made that is with file folders, and my idea would be that I've got these pockets here, and these would be great if people gave you cards for actually storing your cards in. And then it's got lots of writing spots and little things that you can pull out, and there's other little pockets in here where you can actually tuck things in. So you could tuck more tags in there, and people could use this as the guest book. Now, you'd obviously make it in a more wedding-y sort of feel, although this one I think is quite pretty. Lots of pockets to tuck things into, as I said, and there's pockets here, but something like this would be quite good, because once you received your cards or your ephemera from your wedding, you can then tuck it all in here, and there's plenty of room for guests to sign. The other thing you could do would be something like the lace journal, the lace junk journal that I did. I have some more papers, so I will be making another lace junk journal, because I bought 2 lots at the time, but that's just for Susan Davis to let her know what I was meaning when I said a lap book would be good for a wedding. And I had a question from Catherine Yeager about how I made the cover from a hanging file, and she was referring to this here. So this is just a hanging file, this green one, and honestly it's really simple to make. So this is a hanging file. It's a different colour, but it's got the same, you know, the same issue, is that I use this centre of the hanging file as the fold of the journal, and then I just cut it out. So you'll only get one from a hanging file, but you can use the rest of it elsewhere. I just cut it out to the width I wanted it, and then on this side I kept going so that I could have a piece that can fold over, which is what this is. And on this side I just trimmed it into a shape like that, so that when it came together I had something that wasn't flat. You could leave it flat, but I preferred to do it like that. And then in the center I just sewed everything in. So that's pretty simple, and I put an eyelet in here, and then I used some of my vintage buttons that I've got, my vintage boot buttons, and tied the elastic through it so it won't pull through the eyelet on the inside. And then to stop that slipping through that eyelet, I've tied another vintage boot button around there, and then that elastic goes on there. So that's how I made these particular covers with the hanging file. But you could do other options with the hanging files. All you have to do to them is just cut this piece here off. This is a brand new one that I got as a sample, but any old hanging files will work like that. My other suggestion would be that when you're on holidays, send yourself postcards. So all of these are postcards that I've sent back to myself. And what I've got now is a nice collection of different postcards. As well as that, when I was overseas, I purchased postcards that I didn't send back. And the reason that I did this is because you'll always get a better picture than what you can, do. These are from the Bone Church in Kutná Hora in just outside of Prague. And they're really cool. And also, I've got things like this on, and that's one I've sent back to myself. This one here, this is a pretty one I bought in Amsterdam. I like this one. I actually got that at the airport on the way home. I don't even know what it is, but I just like the picture. And these ones here I bought at a little stationery shop, and I think I got them in Germany, and I can't remember where it was, maybe Dresden, maybe not. But I had a really interesting conversation with the owner of this tiny little shop, and he was telling me all about who this person is, Alphonse Mucha. There it is there. And that was really interesting. So there's something that I remember when I was talking to him. So I'll be able to journal about that. The other thing I look for are bookmarks, because all of this stuff is really little. It'll fit in your bag really easily. It doesn't weigh much. And you get some really cool things like these bookmarks, which are beautiful. And also these postcards here that I got, which are watercolours. And I mean, I do watercolour, but nothing like this. I bought these with the thought that, oh, maybe I can, sit down and recreate something like this. I'm not sure if I can, but that's why I bought them. And also they're beautiful, and I'll be able to use them in my journals. I also went into stationery shops and I found really interesting botanical postcards. They're just beautiful. And I bought these because I like the images on them. They look vintage, they're not. And that was just in a stationery shop as we were walking along the streets of somewhere in Europe. And I said, oh, I'm just going to pop in here and find these and look for those. And that's what I found. And just like all these other things, these are actual cards rather than postcards. But that's of the Charles Bridge, which is a very famous bridge in Prague, which we walked across. And I just love all the images. They're just beautiful. These are from the museum, from the Van Gogh Museum. So that's the Yellow House and that's Farmhouse. They're famous paintings that he's done. These were just found as I wandered along the streets as well. These ones here that have got the months on them. I didn't buy every month. I didn't like the image on every month, so I just picked out the ones that I liked. They're very cute. And these ones here, which are from the one of the museums that we went into, which was the I don't know which museum it was, but anyway, these are from the museums. I like the images on these ones, and there's just one that I grabbed at the airport on the way out because I thought that was a really cool picture of the windmills. And I bought these at the ABBA Museum, which we went to in Sweden, of course, and they're really nice. This is from Girona in Spain. So all of these things you can actually, buy, and even though they're not vintage, they'll create some interest in your junk journals. All right, so that's probably enough for today, and I've answered some of your questions. Thank you very much for asking them. I'm happy to answer anything that you'd like to ask. I will do my best to answer them anyway. But for now, this is Deborah. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers.